All right, we're live and have the early show uppers and Kurt. How you doing?
How's it going, guys?
Hey, Kurt.
Hey, Kurt.
All right. Today, okay, I've got a whole list of cases. We'll see when people come in, go out, whatever. It seems like everybody is doing a stream right now. So there's a lot of conflict or, crossover. I hope everybody's using all their devices at the same time because trying to keep up is ridiculously hard. I want to open with the case. I think Sean suggested we talk about this case here. The Delphi murders. Apparently, there has been a shakeup in what is happening there. Can you enlighten us?
Yes. So a couple weeks ago, they had their hearing, and I think, Steve, you may have mentioned it on one of the past Fridays. And the judge said, "Oh, your attorneys have withdrawn." Little did we know, the judge basically said, if you don't withdraw, and this is where I'm going to publicly shame you and blow this, what appears to be it wasn't the best thing that could have happened, but it relatively non-issue out in the open and literally caused problems for Richard Allen, who's the defendant. And these guys rightfully did the right thing. They minimized harm to their client, but they also are not letting it go. She said, well, you're not appointed anymore to represent him. So they said, fine, we're pro bono. And he has the right to hire whoever he wants, and you can hire attorneys pro bono. So that was a big, way to get around that issue. And the judge still tried to disqualify him. So they have now gone to the Indiana Supreme Court and aired everything out. They're just letting it all hang out there, and they're going to, basically force this issue to come to a head. And there are they filed what's in Indiana, you could do two things together. It's called a writ of mandamus and a writ of prohibition. So writ of mandamus is ordering that something be done. And the writ of prohibition is a writ where a court is ordered to not do something. And basically, we're finding out that this court, the trial judge, has been monkeying around with the filings that have been done. There's things that should have been filed that we can't see, that aren't even in the system, that the judge tried to claim her gag order covered the court filings, which that's not how it works, because your record is supposed to speak to what's going on. The record speaks for the trial and the proceedings, and you should be allowed to examine the record and figure out what's going on. But the judge has tried to hide everything. And this goes back to them asking for the issues regarding the state withholding evidence, the state basically supporting perjury, the search warrants involved that were pejorious, it appears. All of these issues, the judge is just kind of brushing off, and she is just hammering the defense at this point. And this is going to come to a big head. This is going to explode. And with the new attorneys that were appointed, the judge still went ahead and hired new attorneys for Richard Allen. So the case now is being pushed back to October of next year. So
Sean, she actually ordered the clerk, although I don't think the clerk did it, to strike the attorney's filing, saying, hey, I know I told you under pressure that I would file a motion to withdraw, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stay in the case. And she said, treat that as filed by mistake and actually delete it from the docket and strike the filings. But I don't think the clerk did that, though.
No, I don't think she did. I think you can still see it there. The thing is, though, with Indiana, too, it's weird. You have to register and log in to actually pull the documents. But for right now, it's this judge is doing so many weird things, and she's fighting so hard, and it doesn't. So I'm sure she has there's going to be either a really scandalous answer or a really stupid answer, and either one of those is.
But if you're throwing them off the case and saying you can't even file things, it seems like this order should have some kind of findings in it. Are you saying they're incompetent and therefore you can't let them move forward on the case? Or are you saying they're in contempt of court for violating it? She just said, well, they're gross negligent. And I think that's the only thing she put in her order. Well, what? Yeah. I mean, what does that mean? Because Allen said he wanted these lawyers.
Yeah, and I agree. And, she's kind of in a hard place because she'll say, well, I promised them that I wouldn't air this out because I extorted them in the back room to withdraw. So that's where this comes into. What is her underlying reason for all this? And I'm sure it's going to be something stupid, because it's generally not some massive conspiracy like she's in on it with the murderers and the Odinist, but she's just an idiot. And then she got stuck in a hole, and judges, there are a lot of judges who don't like to be told what to do. And from there, they just, will double down. So I have a feeling that's what it's going to turn into, but
you're turned off, Sean. I don't know what it switched. It sounded like.
Yeah, it did to me. The cover up is the bigger problem, because a lot of these orders could be correct in the abstract, because it could be the case that the lawyers are not fit to serve this case for any number of reasons. But the fact that these things are being kept off the record is concerning, because if it's correct that these lawyers are unfit to serve, then the judge is making the correct decision, put it on the record. If the judge is making a mistake, then they can be reviewed. But the fact that they're trying so hard to keep it off the record is what flags my attention more than anything else. It's like, wait a second, what are you doing with these? You say the gag order applies to court orders. That makes zero sense. Gag orders is all about preventing things from being out in the public because you don't want to pollute the court proceeding. Okay, well, a gag order applying to court proceedings doesn't really make sense. So the whole thing is strange.
And then she appoints these two new attorneys who are from her county, not the county where the case is pending, because she's a special judge for it. And what's interesting to me, I'm not a defense lawyer, is one of them had been doing interviews on TV about the case and had commented on the ballistic evidence, saying, hey, they can match this up and stuff. And I don't think he said, hey, Alan's certainly guilty, but I would have taken his flow of comments to say, they probably got a pretty good case against this guy. And now he's appointed on the case and takes the case. I don't do defense, but does that sound right to you guys?
No, I wouldn't. If I was involved in a case or if I was commenting on a case and then somebody tried to hire me, and that person tried to hire me, I'd say, like, I can't. Unless I said, like, oh, no, they're awesome and everything's fine, this guy rock on. But there was a case down involving kind of a more infamous lolcow that had gotten in trouble for attacking somebody with a baseball bat. And I'd point out, like, I don't really think he has a defense. I don't think this is good. And I also had made fun of him in general. If he had came to me and tried to offer me money, I couldn't take it, because I've already, made fun of this guy. I've already made my position clear. So I don't think it'd be fair to him. I think it would just be really awkward too, among other things.
So. What do you call it? I mean, let's say the judge is making severe errors. I don't know what you would call it or whatever. From my understanding, there's like a Brady thing if the prosecution is messing up or there's evidence. What is it if a judge is wreaking havoc on a case? What recourse do defendants have?
Sounds like abuse of discretion is what immediately comes to mind, right? The judge gets a lot of latitude, but not infinite latitude.
Yeah.
And so it's like, then the normal remedy is reverse with instructions, unless they screw up so bad. The Court of Appeals is like reverse with a new judge, but that's a pretty big insult usually.
Yeah. And if they do get their warrants of mandamus and prohibition, then the judge is pretty much toast, because I don't know what she's, I doubt she's just going to knuckle under and, give everything back. So we're probably going to see even more action. Like, this isn't going to be over.
So if they did the mandamus,
you think the judge would try to defy an order from a higher court?
And she's already done all this. Yes.
Fantastic.
So, an issue with this is if you think the guy did it, then all these shenanigans let's say the case proceeded on and he was convicted. It could be reversed over all this stuff, which isn't about the facts of the case, but it's about the procedure of the case. And the judge shouldn't be the story, right?
Yes, that's the other thing. Yeah. Which, like I said, why is she doing all this? And I'm sure it's for a stupid reason. And it's, she's going to be the one who screws it all up, possibly.
Wow. I have no idea what's going on, but is it me, or are there more and more judges that seem to be getting personally involved, or dare I say activist on cases?
It's not that there's more, you're just seeing it.
Oh,
yeah.
Because this judge, I guarantee you, this is how she is. I guarantee you, she and I could say this because I'm never going to be in front of Judge Gold. I'm sure she operates very heavy-handedly. I'm sure she operates like this. I'm sure she jerks cases around and does what she wants. She didn't just decide I'm going to start doing. You don't decide I'll do what I want under the national spotlight for the first time. She's been operating under I do what I want probably for quite a while now, if not for a lot of her time as a judge.
I don't necessarily. Yeah, that's fair, but I don't necessarily object to it in the abstract, because I get equally frustrated, if not more frustrated, by judges who just like let anything go, and then sometimes you stuck in motion practice hell, or discovery hell, or whatever else going on because the judge is just waiting for the parties to do around, or they won't make a decision. Mm-hmm. And I actually do appreciate judges who are like, okay, this is my courtroom. This is what's happening. We're on this schedule. Everyone get on board the train because we're moving along. So I do appreciate judges who, at least what the rules are, right? And you understand what's going on. So the judge is clear. So I don't necessarily object to it. Again, what makes me much more concerned here is the judge is hiding things. And it's like, look, if you're making a decision, make a decision, make it on the record, justify your decision. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but you make the decision. You let the courts review it above, and as long as you're doing something that makes sense, especially judicial efficiency goes a long way. But I think this raises questions because she's trying to hide the ball. It's never a good sign.
No, I agree. I think it should be on the record that they did A, B, C, and D, and so that means they're incompetent. I'm not going to let this case go forward with incompetent counsel, or they did A, B, C, D, and they violated court orders, and the sanction reaches the point where I'm taking them off the case, because I don't think they've been sanctioned before in this case. To imagine your first sanction is you get booted off of the case seems very extreme.
Yeah, and the circumstances around this whole issue are not them. I mean, there's only so much you can do. It sounds like somebody literally basically short of breaking in stole something, and it's like, are you supposed to frisk everybody coming in and out of your office? I mean, there's only so much I think they could have done anyway, and this judge is just, because I think ultimately whatever comes out her allegations, it's really going to come down to like, wait, this is all they did, like this is your big concern.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, next case. This one also came, Sean. It's a very important crime wave that has just been stopped. This is the notorious or infamous booty patrol.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I saw this yesterday.
More funding.
Yes.
So, Sean, break it down. What's going on? What's this crime wave?
This is a very noble 18-year-old lad who realized you can't have booty running wild in the streets. I mean, unchecked booty, it's a scourge of society. So he's patrolling it, and sometimes thoughts have their booties out there, and so thoughts need to be patrolled. So he's really doing God's work at the end of the day. But the police, the state isn't doing enough. He has to step in to fill the void. Yes. He's vigilante patrolling. So yes, he has a big green stripe on it. Yes, it's a play on the Border Patrol. The idea that I think anybody would ever be confused by this, I guess, yes, if English is not your primary language and you see a green striped white truck, yes, you think it's La Migra. But otherwise, I don't think anybody else has ever been confused by it. Now, allegedly, he claims to have had red and blue flashing lights in it, which that's
illegal. Yeah, that's illegal.
But I don't know if that's true though, because the police are claiming he pulled people over, but that also appears to be in dispute, and it appears that he's already had a run-in with the police before and they didn't do anything about it. It wasn't a big issue. So I don't know. I think it's just hilarious, and I think the idea of smacking this kid up with an impersonating a police officer charge, I think is ridiculous. Get him for having flashing like unauthorized strobe lights in a car or whatever it is, make him pay a ticket and move on. But the idea that he was trying to impersonate a police officer.
But hold on, because the impersonation has to deal with not what he intended to do, but how a reasonable person would perceive.
Yes.
If you got lights and pulling me over, and
Well, but I don't think like if he pulled people over, it's like, ma'am, I need to know, how's that booty looking? Like, You know, press it up against glass for me. Like, but that's where I mean, what was actually happening, and I
Yeah.
You know,
the blue lights I saw were down on the running boards with some other lights, and it looked more like he was just trying to create a thing, not actually like harass people and stuff like that. But I think that's what they got him on. But it looked like to me he was clearly just having some fun with it.
I find it inspiring. I'm thinking about having my car repainted.
Booty Patrol?
I don't know if I can call it Booty Patrol. I'll have to call it something else, so it's not the same shtick, but we'll find something else.
Yeah, we have
apparently someone in California called theirs Thought Patrol.
You call yourself the Tex Ass Rangers. There you go.
Oh, that's not bad.
Got it.
I like that.
That's a free one, Kurt.
All right. Next case. This just literally came in. Some of you, I'm sure, are covering this dude.
Yes.
Happy days.
Wrongful conviction.
He survived to the end of the trial.
He did. Yeah, the jury was not going to be in today on Friday anyway, because apparently one of the jurors had some sort of big family gathering that they told the judge about like weeks ago, I guess. And so the judge had already decided that there wasn't going to be court on Friday because of this family reunion, whatever, for one of the jurors. So basically, Thursday wound up being a day before a 3-day holiday. And as is not atypical, when you get to the end of that week, the jury's like, do we really want to have to come back in on Monday, especially after a 3-day weekend? Probably not. Also, he's incredibly guilty. So they convicted him of everything, faces a statutory max of 110 years. He won't get that because that's a statutory max, but he will spend the next several decades in jail, in prison, without his beloved internet. It will be hard.
Or his Adderall.
I know. Very difficult.
Or his girlfriend.
Or his girlfriend. So, and apparently sentencing is on the Ides of March, which is a nice touch.
All right. And what do you think he will go away for? 20 years or so? Or, I mean, what would be...
Yeah, if I was a betting man, I would think something in that order of magnitude, 20 to 40 years would be my bet. I think that the prosecutor will ask for an upward departure, and I'm sure they'll get it because of the scale of the thing. So
have all the politicians who took money from him and done the honorable thing and given this stolen money back?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they'll get to that. I'm sure they're going to be getting to that right away. I do think when he did his when he took the stand. On cross-examination, he said, I don't recall, or I don't know, over 140 times. Questions the state gave him. And it's just,
and then the prosecution was like, that's okay, we do. Roll that beautiful beat footage.
Yes. Yeah, I also didn't realize this. Like, I knew he'd been involved with Almeida, like all that. He was the sole member of their board. I didn't know that part till I'd been reading through it. It's like, wow, this,
big red flag.
Yeah. It's like, even how much worse can he get? Apparently, it got a lot worse than I thought.
Wasn't he trying to blame his girlfriend for all this? Too?
Oh, he's trying to blame a lot of people, and that there are 8 sets of books they were running, and everyone but him.
Yeah, he's a real prize. I'm glad that it actually came down to his being convicted. Happy days. I don't know. I personally think that Elizabeth Holmes got off fairly easily.
She did. She should have got that full 20 years. She should have got maxed out.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling he'll do worse than Elizabeth Holmes.
Oh yeah.
Oh, certainly. And what was the other thing? The way it's he's got his other trial still too. That's the other thing for him. He's still got his trial involving bribing the Chinese government for $100 million. He's got. There's even more time coming his way. Yeah, they had like $1 billion held up by the Chinese government, and they initially were trying to be like, they were setting up like fake accounts to try to get the money out, and then after a while, they're just like, hey, here's $100 million. Can we get the money out? And I'm like, I'm not gonna lie. If it's the Chinese government, I would have done that from the start, because it's not like they're gonna tell anybody about it. But yeah, it all turned into a mess for him. So,
wow. Okay. From the chat, I don't know anything about this case, but question: in the Caitlin Armstrong murder trial, can the prosecution introduce her recent escape from custody and the pending federal passport misuse cases as evidence against her?
I mean, typically, like, escape can be used as circumstantial evidence of guilt, like fleeing from a crime scene. You know, the prosecutor will frequently say, well, an innocent person would stick around and help try to explain what happened. If you're being charged with murder and you try to escape, that's certainly well, why are you escaping? Well, because you don't want to face the music and trying to, I don't know what passport misuse there, but maybe she was, who uses a false passport? Bad guys. I mean, it's not direct evidence, but frequently juries are allowed to infer something, your guilt from your actions. So,
but it sounds. I think the question would also be propensity, though, right? Do you, like if it you may have a propensity argument here, acting in coordinates. Just because I did these bad things, I may, it doesn't mean I did these other bad things.
Well, no. It's just saying the jury's allowed to infer like an innocent person wouldn't run away. Well, they're allowed to infer an innocent person wouldn't try to escape. Although, go sit in jail. Anybody's going to try to get out of there. So,
yeah, interesting. Back to the original, or the one we just covered with Sam Bankman-Fried. Barnes stated that the extradition orders did not include the money laundering, so he cannot be charged for the politicking.
Yeah, that was what happened. He was originally charged for the money stuff, and then it got dropped for exactly that reason. Wasn't part of the extradition warrant.
And that's part of the bribery charge as well.
I'm sure that really upset members of both parties in Congress, that he couldn't be charged on that, and maybe people aren't being called as witnesses. I'm sure that they didn't fight super hard to try to keep that charge in there, but I'm a little cynical. Maybe.
Yes, a lot of sweat got mopped off brows.
All right, I pulled this tweet up. I just saw this earlier, and I thought it might be an interesting topic for all of us to talk about, especially with you guys, because you do technically a lot of reactions when you're talking about a trial, for instance. And I have been reading more and more and more, and Roberto Blake is a pretty strong, creator guy, works with a lot of YouTubers, etc. So he's wired in. A lot of channels are getting demonetized at the reaction channels, or like they'll hit 100,000 subscribers and they won't get verified because they're considered that their content is not original enough. I've also heard of some of them not getting monetized at all down the line. And I'd love to have the discussion. I'm sure you guys are tired of talking about it, but this gets into that whole reaction and fair use and what is and isn't. And I feel like it's legitimately been coming up lately, especially with some like Twitch streamers who are out there. Apparently will just put on like a movie, sit in the corner, there are pictures in the corner, and eat popcorn, whatever they're going to do. They'll even just like walk off, go to the restroom, make some coffee, come back while this is playing in the background. I would argue that doesn't fall under fair use. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd agree with that.
And I'm curious on what you would define as being fair use. My personal opinion is if the people are watching the content to see you versus the content you are sharing or using, then it is more likely to be fair use because you are the subject and that other content is used to support whatever your theme might be. I don't know if I'm wording it out well, but people won't be confused and avoid watching the original work because you're not really taking anything away from it.
I don't know. I think, I always consider fair use like self-defense, right? It's a defense. I did the thing, but I have a defense why I shouldn't be held liable for the thing. And I think a lot of people who delve into fair use forget that it is a defense. You have to admit to the underlying content. I am using someone else's stuff for profit. I think in that vein, just as in self-defense, there's no magic bullet, like, because every situation is unique. It has to be contextualized. I can't say in every single case this way is self-defense, because then there's a case where something may change and that may be it. So I think when it comes to fair use, what I'm assuming is happening is that you have the SS Sniper Wolf. I don't know if you guys know who SS Sniper Wolf is. She's the beautiful YouTuber with 34 million subscribers, and she essentially steals TikTok videos, puts them up, and just oh wow, that's great. Oh my god, and essentially just playing the TikTok video, and everybody goes and watches the TikTok video with her minimal.
I'm amazed she hasn't been sued yet because she's a big enough channel, and she is not doing fair use content a lot of the time.
I would just claim it. If I was them, I would just claim it and be like, take the money. I mean, her audience is that big. I mean, it would almost be worth it to say, okay, fine, I'll just copyright claim it and just take all the proceeds from it and leave it up, because you're talking about millions and millions of views and I might not have even gotten. That could be a smart investment. Plus, people will see my face or my TikTok, and maybe that'll cause them to look at it. And the algorithm might actually start to suggest my shorts or whatever they are to the audience who is watching her video. So in a weird way, a creator could potentially profit from somebody stealing their content. Or am I misinterpreting?
Well, no, true. I agree with that point, but what I'm saying is I think there's been a rash of this. MXR Plays was big back, when Legal did that whole video on that, where they were essentially doing the same thing, just watching entire videos, and it's even happening on the left. It happens a lot too. I forgot Chank's younger brother,
Hassan.
Yeah, he just sits there and just watches the video and says, and that's his commentary.
And then he walks away to go eat chicken tendies at the time too.
Yeah, that's his commentary. So I think in all those cases, those are obviously violations. But I think, when you talk about now just someone like, for instance, I did a reaction to the, Who's Black, like they did the whole thing with the Who's Black, and I did a reaction to that. It was so much commentary within that, even though I played the whole video. In the comments, you saw people was like, well, listen, I had to go watch the original video because I didn't want to hear all the stuff that you were saying in between and all that stuff. That I think is fair, but even that I think is borderline, because I played the full video. So that's why it's hard to say all of this is fair use, but I do think what she's doing particularly is not fair use. So now going back to what YouTube is doing, I think YouTube has a problem, and that YouTube is this pass through, is they get that protection. But if it gets to a point where they know people are doing this and they're not doing something about it, there's an argument that it could put their protection at some risk. So I think that's when it comes to this monetization piece and all that, where they're now saying, hey, we have to kind of calm down on this. And if we know this is happening and we've been alerted to it and we don't do anything about it, then it may become a problem for us. So that I think it's kind of more brand protection than anything. I don't think it's really the content, but it's more brand protection.
I will give them credit. They've gotten a little bit better on the copyright strikes and claims, because I personally have gone through with the original America's Untold Stories channel, the channel getting completely removed because of 3 strikes in one day. It appears now they have 3 strikes, your channel will be removed in 7 days or something like that, which to me is far superior, because then at least you could sit there and battle it out and counterclaim and things like that before this nuke happens. You guys have any thoughts about that?
I think it's also a bigger issue is for YouTube. It's becoming more and more corporatized. There's more and more corporate media, so they're having, because there's all kinds of these reaction channels where it's like they're just sitting there like in beanbag chairs, they're watching it, and yes, it's like a very lazy version of fair use. It's probably the laziest version, and I just think YouTube is kind of like, okay, well, we're also probably trying to avoid paying these people, so they're demonetizing them, but also the corporate interests that are slowly eating up more and more of YouTube space are saying, these guys are playing our videos, are playing our shows, stop them. And YouTube looks at them and says, yeah, you're paying the bills, so we're going to go do your dirty work for you. I think that's part of it. And also, I think it's really become a very lazy part of it. Very lazy part of the reacting. I mean, there's all kinds of channels where, it's not like they're just reacting to like a clip out of a movie or a clip out of a TV show, but they're watching like the whole series. Yeah. Like episode 1 up all the way through a season. And it's this is people getting greedy, and when the hogs who get greedy get slaughtered.
It's an interesting phenomenon too, because there are times where there was like these two kids, different ages, and they were reacting to Phil Collins in the air tonight. There's a very common thing for music and reactions and whatever, and their reaction on the drum fill went completely viral because they were sitting there going, "Oh yeah, they're good." It's like, what the hell just happened? Yeah. And I would argue a lot of the music reaction channels are absolutely, it's getting really dicey on fair use because they're playing the whole song, etc. But then sometimes they're enhancing the song, like Phil Collins in the air tonight, when they did that reaction and it went viral, his song actually hit the top 10 for the first time in 30 something years. And so it's a crazy weird balance. And it also happened with a TikTok video, and that one was perfectly fine because the music is licensed apparently through TikTok. Like whatever, if you're on TikTok and you make a video and you find a song, you're fine because they've got an arrangement. But it was Fleetwood Mac, and again, that put them back on the map for the first time in literally decades.
But Eric, I think you're talking about two different things. You're talking about there's liability, but you're talking about damages, right? So they are obviously stealing their stuff, but now even with copyright, you have to go to the damages piece of it. And I think that's the piece where they may have the problem. How are you damaged? Because defamation and copyright, you got to prove damages. So the argument would still be, well, even though they stole it, you weren't damaged because you became number one or whatever. It's that type of thing. So I think that may be the difference here in talking about whether they're liable for stealing their content and then whether they're able to recover because they weren't harmed.
Okay, well, I find that interesting because I think this is a nuanced, complex issue, and why I wanted to bring it up is, you guys cover trials, right? Now that to me is a public hearing, and I like it. I like the idea of seeing a public hearing and getting input. But then Joe, I don't know if you saw it just this past week. Kurt, you might have been on with him when it happened. I don't remember.
Yeah, with the court order, and then I was on there. I was like, wait a second, what's going on here? And the whole thing was a little bit ridiculous.
That's another question. It's like, how? What do you do in that situation where you have a judge who's like saying, well, only such and such is allowed to do this? What does she say? Approved journalist or something?
Approved media. And then we looked at the rules and we couldn't figure out based on the rule whether it applied to us or not in the first place because the way the rule was written. But yeah, it was a weird thing because it's like, okay, you don't want to have this broadcast or recorded at all. Like, okay, I guess that's a choice. But then to say, okay, certain media outlets can do this and others can't is a very weird thing. Because what Joe did, Joe was watching the Zoom hearing directly from Zoom. And then it's like, okay, only authorized people can broadcast this and they can't broadcast or record it otherwise. So then he just goes over to C-SPAN, which has a camera in the exact same courtroom. And it's not as good because the feed isn't quite as clean, especially when they're listening to the Zoom audio from the witness, because now it's a speaker in the courtroom that the microphone has to pick up as opposed to being a direct feed from the microphone. So it'd be akin to this being on a TV and trying to record the audio coming out of the TV as opposed to the direct feed. So it's inferior, but you still can hear everything. So you're getting everything substantively the same. So what's the point at that point is beyond me. Also, whether the order applied to us at all, because we're not in Colorado, not lawyers in Colorado, not physically there, is a whole other thing too. So the whole thing was just weird.
I still, at the end of the day, even if I was in Colorado, the idea you're going to tell people, no, the public, this is being broadcast openly. Other outlets are broadcasting it.
Yeah.
But not you. No, you're not allowed to do that.
What's the harm?
Well, it's harming the First Amendment, but
yeah,
I get
the harm to the court or the harm to the system.
There's no harm. Oh, they're providing commentary. Oh no, how dare you say things about the process? The judicial process in this country. How dare you, as a peasant, voice your opinion that something's not being done right?
And I'll kindly remind the judicial branch that they're also the government to which the First Amendment applies.
And this since when do it makes no sense that if you're ABC News, you can show the trial, but if you're just some guy who wants to look at the trial, you can't show the trial. What gives them that right? It's like it's like the First Amendment only applies to them, but not to everyone else. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I mean to say, oh, this person's designated a journalist. Well, we're all journalists. Like you're commenting on a newsworthy event. Like that's
it's pretty newsworthy. Trying to get Trump removed from the ballot. I mean, it's factually interesting, legally interesting. I have an interest in it on a professional level, on a personal level, on a political level.
And this judge is she's exercising national jurisdiction. Why not global? Anywhere in the world. If I catch you showing a clip of this, then I'll get you hailed into.
Judges have tried before. They have tried.
Well, and that's once again, I think this is where judges sometimes get over their skis a little bit. I told Joe because there's a Twitter chat where Joe commented. I'm like, F her, let her enforce her order. Like, just do it. Like, don't be afraid. Like, if I had the time for it, like, I'll do it today. I'll go off the WebEx thing and I'll be like, hey, I'm here in Ohio. Go tell the Ohio Supreme Court I'm doing something wrong. I'm sure they won't hang up on you within 30 seconds. So
extradite you, right?
No, they're gonna send a booty patrol after you, Sean. You're gonna be very careful about that.
Well, there's gonna be a lot for them to patrol. I can tell you that much.
I hope you do that. Now, one thing I do remember in that exchange when you were on there, Kurt, the question of she said you can't record this, and the question technically
I'm not recording it.
Right, but technically a live stream is recording this session. It is being recorded and then transmitted out, and there is a copy of it, depending on your level of StreamYard example, but when it's published to the channel on YouTube, that is a recorded event. So I was like,
yeah, but it's YouTube making the recording, not me.
Okay, well, there you go. Interesting. So between StreamYard and YouTube, it's their fault.
Yeah. See,
I just point at things.
Hyper technicalities, my friend.
No, well, even though there is a function on YouTube, you could turn off the feature where it doesn't record it. So,
is there really?
There is that. Yeah, you can just cast something that's not recorded, so you can't even go back and watch the last 2 seconds of it. Yeah,
but it's still
ignorance.
But I don't know about the recording at all. But yeah, you can turn off DVR so they can't go backwards. But I don't know if that doesn't mean a recording.
But you still actually have to record it in order for it to transmit and for it to spread out. So that's technically, it's still recorded.
Okay,
it's a record and delete, if you will.
Also, back to my earlier point of even with all that, C-SPAN was broadcasting it in the exact same substance, slightly inferiorly. So what are we doing here?
No, I totally agree. Totally agree with that. Okay, this is an interesting story. Somebody sent this in to me as a thing we might discuss. And I don't know, it brings up some questions because, obviously I believe in free speech, things like that. This person has published a book, Ian Halperin, called Bigot. And the purpose of this book is to literally name and shame specific people in a book and essentially say, like Roger Waters is known as not being a huge fan of Israel, and many would argue is anti-Semitic. I'm curious, though, your thoughts, because it kind of makes me uncomfortable. I believe anybody should be able to say anything, but the express purpose of creating a book to list people, what is that? Is it nothing? Is it just tacky? Is it
a phone book? What is a phone book?
It's a book of a list of people. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just joking. I don't know. I understand the whole, but it comes into the whole free speech narrative again, right? Mm-hmm. It's like if he wants to say these people are bad people because I believe they're anti-Semitic and gives factual representations, it's like, do I think it's bad taste? Yes, but
as long as he's factual,
as long
as he's factually correct, then go forth, my friend, I suppose.
Because it seems like he's giving an opinion, and it's interesting because being anti-Semitic is an opinion, right? So if you say this person is anti-Semitic, then the courts, it's just like being racist, right? What does that mean?
Yeah.
To one person, it's very it's too subjective.
Well,
yeah, the naked statement's probably not actionable. The courts have generally come down that way.
It's also that, but also keep in mind these are celebrities. It sounds like, so it's not just like, Bob who runs the bakery down the street is this way, and it's just random, little, like, and I hate to say like little people running around, but these are celebrities. They're gonna be fine. They're gonna survive. They have the ability. They have their own. Roger Waters could come out and say, no, this is all wrong. Screw this guy. They have their ability to fight back on it. So, it might be uncouth, but I think it's fine, well within his right to do it.
This is a very interesting chat. It's almost disturbing in a way. Somebody should make a book of who all the Jews are. Now that starts to get really into a creepy
that
question.
Would be perfectly legal.
Who all the Jews are?
Yeah,
I might be in that book for all I know.
I know, but
they think you're everything else, Nate.
What would be the purpose of that?
The Black Hebrew Israelite, Nate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I hate you, white people. Ah!
Well, we know that, Nate.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that is crazy. Okay, well, we got Nate on now, so he's our transgender guy. So we definitely.
Oh yeah.
If there's if there's any trans story, it's going to be Nate. I'm bringing on the expert here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about this one, Nate. The female martial artist dropping out of the tournament and what's going down.
Well, first I want to say the North American Grappling Association, NAGA. I think that is a fantastic name for this organization, NAGA. It's like perfect. But anyway, it's jujitsu. So they had the policy in which, how do I feel today? If you feel like a woman, then you check a box that says I'm a woman, and you can go wrestle women in jiu-jitsu. You check a box and say I feel like a man, and you're going into the men's category. So they had obviously trans women who decided, hey, not only do I feel like a woman, I am a woman. I'm a woman, loud and true. So they went and went in jiu-jitsu. Now, there was a couple who won medals. I think they won first place, and one won 3 gold medals. The other one won 1 gold medal, and a couple came in second. So what happens is that a lot of these women who wrestled with these biological individuals, but transgendered women, they said that it was crazy because they felt like they were wrestling against men. Shocker, right? Shocker. So then it wasn't because combat sports, it's different than track and field and all that stuff where you're running it, you're in a combat sport, you're trying to actually hurt the other person. You're trying to physically hurt the other person. That's what the idea is here. So a lot of these women felt that it was just too dangerous to put themselves in a position where they're going against, men or biological men with the superior muscular strength and all this other stuff. So they just all dropped out. They're just like, hey, if you're gonna let them compete, just let them have the gold medals. We're not going to compete against them. So it became such an issue that so many women dropped out, not because they didn't feel that they could. It just that they felt that it was just so unsafe to put themselves in a combat sport against men. So they all dropped out, and the competition freaked out. So the NAGA then said, well, let's do this because we want to at least have women compete since we paid all this money for the women's competition. They then banned all transgendered women from the women's competition. So they said you still compete, but you have to compete in the open category. And the open category
which is men.
The men's category. So you can compete in the open category, right? As much as you want, but you can't compete in the women's category because that's limited to people who have not gone through male puberty. So now there's an outrage on the other side, right? Oh my God, these women are real women. So now it's that type of thing. But, they essentially did it to save their particular sport. Now, some people may say, well, why don't they just make a third category? They did that.
Oh, they tried.
So
or
they tried
to try.
Category.
Yes,
Yeah.
so they tried to make
No
a third category.
Up.
And the third category was going to be like another open category. In other words, anybody can join this. So you had the
open-ish?
men's. No, you had the women's category only for women. Then you had the open category for anybody. Then you had like this sub-open category, which if you didn't go to the men's category, you can compete in this third category. So it was, elite men, elite women, and then this third for anybody. And nobody signed up. Yeah, because they said that by having this third category was discriminatory too. So nobody signed up for the third category.
But let's get some factual reality here. I'm willing to bet that the trans athletes aren't going to compete in the open category. And why wouldn't they compete in the open category? They're so strong and so ready and they're free. Well, maybe because they're going to lose. They know they're going to lose, and they have an unfair advantage over biological women, in my opinion. I get very frustrated by things that are so freaking obvious and people trying to use mealy-mouthed language, et cetera, to excuse it. The reality is that biologically speaking, they've grown into fully functional male bodies with extra leverage, extra strengths, better bone structure, things like that in a combat sport. And I think it's fantastic that the women walk like they did. I hope that more women do that all over the place because it is forcing the lie to show itself.
Yes. I agree. I hope it happens more and more. And I mean, the way we'll really see it happening is like at the NCAA when like with the guy who was swimming for Yale or whatever. I think it was Yale or one of the Ivy League schools.
Leah Thomas.
Yeah. Oh, well. Yeah. When he does that and all those girls having to stand there and clap and stand on the podiums, I understand they've got something at risk, but I mean, just to have them walk off like I'm not taking an award, have a good one. I mean that's when you'll know things are really. I mean that's what needs to happen.
Now, guys, our misogynistic terminology. Okay.
Well, what alarms me about what Christina's saying is she's assuming the gender of everybody on the panel, which could have changed from the time it started and may change again by the time the stream's over.
Mine's always changing.
I am non-binary. I'm sorry, you bigot.
It's like a lava lamp.
No, but you know what? It's so weird because don't get me wrong. All right, and I want to be as accommodating as anyone else, right? I don't mind if you say call me Mary, sure, Mary. She, sure, she. But I think the big issue with me is that sometimes they assume that you should know before you even meet the person. Like if I meet someone who looks like a dude, I'm going to say he, and then what the hell are you calling me he? I'm like, all right, she know I'm a they. I'm like, okay, how the hell was I supposed to know? It's kind of like that whole thing. And like now, I think in Canada they were trying to make it a crime to misgender someone. Mm-hmm. It's like, but it's like that's starting to get absurd. You know what I mean? At this point in time, I think two things people have to realize. Number one, even if someone like me who doesn't mind calling you whatever gender you want to be called, that's my choice. But equally, someone who doesn't want to play that game has the right not to play that game. And to take that right away from them is also wrong. And I think that's what some people just don't understand. My right to be accommodating is buttressed by your right not to be accommodating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I'm over the choosing my own pronouns thing, but I would like to advocate for choosing my own adjectives. And I demand that you recognize me as sexy and desirable and beautiful. And if you don't recognize me that way, you're a bigot.
You're not that far off on that because there are people out there, Kurt, who will say that, Kurt, if you're not going to date trans women, you are a bigot. Mm-hmm. They actually there are people who really do spread that shit out. That you have to biologically be attracted to a trans woman, or you are obviously a transphobe.
Well, so, I try to be more open-minded and don't say she or he if it's not necessary, and just replace it with the universal that asshole. And I think that works for most situations.
No,
I
but you know,
like that.
it's so funny because sometimes when you don't use the pronouns, people get upset. Like, say if you could, again, here in the South, if you don't call somebody she or miss, or they'll be like, "What the hell are you talking about? That I'm a woman." What you know?
Ma'am,
So
yeah,
it's
call
like
everyone ma'am or sir, no matter what your age is. Yeah,
you get it on both sides. So it's like you can't say anything now.
Yeah, it gets ridiculous. But as far as Canada goes, yeah, that's the Bill C-16 that put Jordan Peterson on the map. And he protested because he said, this is compelled speech. He's been proven correct, by the way.
His own professional association is trying to go after him now, and the court isn't stepping in. I read that court decision. It was such foolishness.
Oh, he's having to go through
unprofessional. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, teach him social media training. Man, his social media account, I'm sure, has 10 times more social media than every other psychologist in all of Canada combined.
The world.
Okay? I think he understands how social media works, guys.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's so perfect Orwellian stuff. But to continue on the theme, Steve shared this with me earlier. They're fighting back.
Loudoun County. Oh, they're back in the news?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
Loudoun.
Yes, after they admitted, wow, that dad was right all along, and we were covering things up.
Yeah. The governor wound up actually having to pardon that dad because of all that stuff, because it was true. Yeah. So there really was a sexual assault. And they actually wound up criminally convicting the superintendent of the schools for falsification, basically, of the official record. Which, when was the last time a school board official was criminally convicted, for lying? But yeah, that's how bad that whole situation got. So Loudoun County once in the news again. What are they doing now?
Well, apparently the students walked out in protest of the bathroom policy. So this to me goes beautifully with the women walking out of the martial arts tournament. I think that women have to take their stand. I can't stand up for them or anything else, but I appreciate that they're saying, hey, you know what? If we're going to be treated like second-class citizens, we won't even be here. And I think that's a good way to handle the situation. Just leave. It's not violent. It's nothing else. And the organizations will be punished, because if girls won't attend the school, how can the school get funding from the state? Help me out. Is this a bad way or a good way to deal with it?
Well, don't forget though, the Biden camp has now come out with the whole, if you don't do this for the transgendered community, then you will lose funding, especially I think at the college level. So for instance, if you don't allow biological men to compete with women, then there's a possibility your federal funding, and most schools, and when I talk about federal funding for colleges, a lot of people don't understand what we're talking about. We're talking about student loans, essentially. And if any school from Harvard to the local city college, if any of them lose federal funding, they lose something like 90% of their income. That 90% of their income, because all those loans are backed by the feds. That's federal student loan debt. So that by being able to hold that carrot over their head, essentially is going to force them into this position. And that's what I think is going to happen with these positions, because as long as you got Democrats in there and they say, well, we want it to be this way, and if you don't do it, we're going to remove your funding, then you essentially have no choice.
Well, again, you're talking about university level too on that. This is a high school. So I don't know how much federal funding is involved with the high school. And I still stand by my comment that they should boycott. I think that that's a good move, especially if they don't feel safe. I mean, there is a good parallel to the tournament, Nate. I mean, they did not feel safe in that tournament. And that's an especially obvious, egregious example. I mean, do you remember Fallon Fox and breaking an orbital socket of a defendant? I mean, that's super obvious. But these girls don't feel safe in a school. And by the way, there was a crime. Somebody was convicted and the school was covering up. So they have absolute legitimate claim to not feel safe, in my opinion. And I do feel that, voting with your feet, walk out, private school, whatever it is, it starts to bring visibility to these issues. And I don't know, figure something out. If you need to make gender neutral bathrooms, make single bathrooms in, fine, or they can lock a door. If that's what you got to do that. I don't care. But I don't like the idea of forcing people into scenarios where they don't feel safe. I mean, even amongst people of the same quote unquote sex, it can be extremely uncomfortable in high school. Did you guys enjoy group showers in the gym?
Never had the pleasure. So,
well,
Yeah,
I've had to go through the whole woke universal bathrooms, and they're very. You know what? It's weird because so in law school, I went to a super woke law school. They have so all the bathrooms were kind of gender neutral, where it's just like stalls. So there's no urinals, it's all stalls. So you go inside there. So I went inside once, and I'm just I had to take a piss, and then so I come out, and next thing I know, I see all these women all at the mirror, and that is like the most awkward thing to come out. You have to wash your hands after taking this monster piss, and then sometimes I have to take dumps. And they come out and see all these people out there and be like, "Oh, somebody farted," something like that, because it's not me. But there is an experience there. But so I don't know. It's like I understand where they want to go, but at a point, if I could just imagine how women feel seeing this big guy, 250 pounds walking up, "Hey, how you doing today, babe? Oh, I just took a good piss." It's got to feel a little way about it, and I don't understand why our politicians want to put us in those positions when the simplest thing to do is just keep it the way it is. It's not harming anybody,
I totally agree. But then we can continue on this subject here because it's all coming. South Australia.
Yep.
And it's literally, and this is J.K. Rowling, she's known as the world's biggest transphobe.
Didn't the state of Ohio's Supreme Court, or was it Michigan's Supreme Court, recently say this as well as a matter of their state law, that the judges had to use the preferred pronoun of the people appearing before them?
I don't know if it was Ohio. It might have been Michigan, but a lot of judges do try to do it anyway.
Yeah, but it was actually the highest court in the state recently. One of those states recently said that the judges have to use the preferred pronouns of the people appearing before them. So I'm not surprised that this is coming in Australia too.
Well,
maybe you can find out which state it was.
Though? But for this one though, what's the harm in that?
Okay, the harm is this. She stated it in her tweet. Did you see that?
Yeah.
No, the judge being forced to do it. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, if you're
no, this isn't the judge. This is the people. It's saying everybody has to address it.
Oh, I thought you meant just the judge. That's what I'm saying. I didn't know
everybody. People in chat say Michigan. I was close. Okay.
Oh, okay. See, that's the problem. Yeah. If it's just the judge used the preferred pronouns. I'm like, I don't care about that. Okay. Now, if everybody though, then I think you got no issue there.
Right. And she wrote, literally right here, and I think it's a very valid point, asking a woman to refer to her male attacker or violent attacker as she in court is a form of state-sanctioned abuse. Female victims of violence
absolutely
are being traumatized. That's horrible.
Yes. That's yes.
Mm-hmm.
I totally didn't get that. But
and also, courts are fundamentally a truth-seeking exercise. So if you're forced to speak something that's not true, this is first of all, you could actually. It's very weird because candor to the tribunal is a fundamental rule of ethics. It's like I'm not allowed to lie to the court. Now you're forcing me to lie to the court. It's a very weird position to be in.
Yes, just a bit.
Yeah, I have also found this article in Politico magazine. Apparently,
oh my God, the subtitle already. The trend doesn't look good for transgender kids. Cry me a river, really? Think of
they're gonna get genocided.
Think of the children.
The abuse. Lord. But I looked at the subtitle and I was like, oh, that's good to know. I'm sorry. When I saw that, it's like, oh, so maybe the laws are going to be
the transgender children thing is also just so hysterical because, as has been noted before, we don't let children typically make really serious life decisions because we don't believe them to be competent. They are not allowed to enter contracts, or I suppose they can. They're just legally voidable unless they're for necessities because the child isn't deemed capable of consenting. They're not allowed to consent to having tattoos. They're not allowed to join the military.
Credit card.
They're not allowed to get a credit card. They're not allowed to marry without parent permission. They're not allowed to do a lot of things. But okay, you really think you're a girl. You really think a boy. Okay, let's start making some permanent changes, and let's give you puberty blockers because those are reversible, which they often are not.
They're not.
And even it's like the whole thing is just ridiculous. There's insanity.
But even with this whole, well, I know people are gonna hate me for saying this, but unfortunately, I got to say it. I think the whole they have a video, the youngest transgender child, and they transition this child at like 5 years old. That to me is abuse. That's like ridiculous at that point in time. What 5-year-old knows if they're a boy? 5-year-olds don't see gender.
Also, I'm not exactly an expert, but it wouldn't surprise me that a 5-year-old is experimenting with play and playing different roles because they're trying to figure their way out in the world.
Yeah,
it would a 5-year-old guy, a 5-year-old boy puts on a dress or vice versa, wouldn't necessarily strike me as odd.
Yes, they're just playing.
They're playing.
And so I forget the name of the hospital because they've done this in the UK. So in the UK, they had this hospital. Yes, where they were, but they found that a lot of them regretted it.
A lot of them regretted it. They weren't even really interviewing them. They weren't doing any of the proper care.
And one of the biggest issues was that it had no effect on the rates of self-deletion and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Where even post and pre-op, right? It was like the same thing. So people, and then as soon as people started saying, well, there may be a more deep psychological component that we're not seeing other than these are just how these people are. Maybe this may be something else that we need to look at. It was like, well, you're being bigots and you're not understanding this is how. So it's like, well, hold on. You told us this was a problem. You told us we should gender affirm. We see it literally has no effect on the outcome. And now we're saying, well, let's look for some different cause. And you're saying, no, this is the only solution. But we know now that it's not. And this hospital was exactly, the setting to show that this was an issue. So.
But it's big money. It's big money now, and it's also virtue signaling, and there's a part of society that loves it when those two things come together. It's big money in this area, that's for sure.
But I covered 2 or 3 different stories during my morning roundup when I was doing that, where people were starting to sue the hospitals for the gender transitioning, quote unquote, care because they're like, I didn't have enough information. I was walked down the blind path. I wasn't given psychiatric screening. I was review.
10 years old.
I didn't really understand what's going on. Yeah. And this is the only thing that's going to stop the madness. The lawsuits are going to be the only thing that stops the madness. And so we started to see a couple of those getting filed. And that's the only thing that's going to stop the madness. It's like, oh yeah, amazingly, children, especially when you're hacking off bits, that can't be fixed. And the hormone therapies, even if they're quote unquote reversible, that's still a whole bunch of time. You should have been going through something that you weren't, and that time can't be got back. So the only thing that will stop it are the lawsuits.
And I'm disagreeing about that supposedly reversible. That's incredibly controversial and debated very heavily in the medical community. And also, especially right now, there are huge problems. Oh, I know, but there's huge problems already with fertilization rates. Women are struggling more and more and more. So it's like literally, as a society, there are more and more studies coming out that people are having trouble reproducing. Populations are shrinking. So I don't know.
But the one thing that is true is that there's never been anything that said they are reversible. Everything points to them being irreversible. Yes. There's been conjecture saying they could be, but nothing. There's been no evidence to show that they actually are. This is just kind of nonsense has been put out there. And matter of fact, no one who's ever gone fully through male puberty has ever been able to be reversed. I can say that confidently.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. I got a Rumble rant that came in here saying, "Is Nate Bean non-binary? Why isn't he on the YouTube top bottom sub chart?" And I guess that this is the ultimate YouTuber kinky chart. Yes. And I'm happily not on here.
I love the Frogman's prominence. He's the king of kings.
Look at that. Crowder somewhere right in the middle there.
Alex Jones is in the top right corner.
Yep, the Frogman reigns
He's a
supreme.
dom. He's a dom.
He's a top dom, apparently.
All that alpha brain.
Yep. But look at Tim Pool.
Bottom.
Oh my God! There's Ricada.
Ben Shapiro in the bottom left corner.
Yeah,
Yep.
Not a surprise.
Well, there was a meme going around that nobody's seen Dylan Mulhavey and Ben Shapiro at the same time in the same room. I don't know.
It's harsh.
That's the truth. The truest knife cuts the deepest.
I'm just sharing, and especially if you look, you're like, oh, there is a similarity there. All right, some super chats. If y'all get to the Maya JHACH case, any opinions on the bombshell where the hospital may be found to have made a material lie on the stand? Rob is going to try to join us. It looks like he may not be here. I think Rob is covering the Maya case.
By far,
extensively.
It's insane what they did. It's insane what that hospital did.
Yeah, it's a very complicated story. I tried to cover a piece of it on my channel as well, going through the medical journey. It's a tough case on the facts. It's a tough case emotionally. It's a tough case for first principles, because it's like you're trying to figure out, at least for me, like trying to figure out like what the rule is, because I'm a process oriented guy. I'm a rule oriented guy. So when I see a situation like this, one of the things that goes back into my mind is like, okay, what is the rule from first principles? Like, and if this case changes the rule, that's fine, but I need to change the rules consistently throughout, right? Because I could learn more and adopt the rule, but I want to find what the rule is in a universal way so I can apply it consistently. And one of the things that is challenging for me is, it's hard from first principles. Some of the things the hospital did were very questionable at best, but it's hard from first principles for like Dr. Smith, for example, and what she saw and what she thought about things. It's hard from first principles to necessarily condemn her, because everything she thought could have been true. And the fact that she was wrong doesn't necessarily mean that she wasn't trying to make the best decisions that she could with the information that she had, because doctors will sometimes be wrong, but it doesn't mean that they're not making well-educated decisions. So trying to figure out from first principles, like questions like I said in my video, like who gets to just decide? Who gets to decide when it comes to a child, right? What role does parents play? What role does the state have? What role does the hospital have? What role does a doctor play? What role does another doctor play? Who gets to make these decisions and when? And because you can imagine in any given scenario, one or more of these people could be bad actors, right? The parents could, in principle, be bad actors. The doctor, in principle, could be a bad actor. So trying to decide the rule so that you deal with all that in a way that applies consistently has been very, very challenging for me to deal with.
Can you break down exactly what happened?
I can give you the basic breakdown of what happens. Okay, yeah. So Maya's a young girl. She starts experiencing this throbbing pain in her legs that has no apparent cause. She's diagnosed with a very rare syndrome, with this chronic pain syndrome. She goes to a doctor in Florida who initially prescribes ketamine infusion therapy. Ketamine is a powerful hallucinogenic. I've actually taken it incidentally for depression at much lower dosages. So I have some experience personally with ketamine. She's taking it at higher dosages to try to help her brain reset, because it allows the brain to become more plastic and allows the brain to experience a much more freeform thinking. She's then given a ketamine-induced coma by a doctor in Mexico to help reset her brain even more, on the idea that by helping her brain rewire, because there's no physical cause that anyone can find, that helping her brain rewire will help her neurological condition. She goes to Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital initially for a fairly routine medical procedure. This doctor at Johns Hopkins, whose name is Dr. Smith, it's a woman doctor, has been designated by Johns Hopkins as this child abuse pediatrician, So one of her roles is to help figure out if the child is being abused by the parents or other people. She believes that Maya doesn't have this chronic condition, that she believes it's Munchausen by proxy, that the parents are the ones inducing it. And Maya might genuinely believe that she has it, but it is purely psychological. It's all just in her head. It's just not really happening. It's just all psychosomatic. So she then proceeds to basically have the child removed from her parents' custody, initially without a court order, incidentally, starts trying to reverse all the ketamine therapy and taking actions to have Maya's treatments radically changed because she believes it's all fake. And then the hospital does things like putting her in a dark room without, care, and taking her clothes off to photograph her body without her parents' consent, without her consent, without a court order, and doing all kinds of things without anyone's consent or without any authorization. Refused to discharge Maya, again, without a court order, without a parent's consent, without the child's consent. No one's consenting to this. Refused to allow her to leave. Refused to allow her to do things. Forcing her to undergo medical procedures without any consent. And it's a whole complicated nightmare. But that's the basic short of what's going on.
Wow.
And then they said, oopsie poopsie. I guess you were right all along.
Oh, so the parents were correct in the diagnosis?
Well, I don't know if they were correct in the diagnosis, but the hospital
they weren't
wasn't
wrong.
correct. The hospital wasn't correct that it was Munchausen by proxy.
Yeah.
So the hospital wasn't correct. Whether my parents were correct, I suppose, is somewhat still in the eye of the beholder, because unfortunately the thing that she's diagnosed with has no good diagnostic test. It's basically a diagnosis by exclusion.
Yeah. It's also kind of
because it's not anything else, it must be this. So that's not ideal.
It's also kind of like fibromyalgia. There's no specific, like you can take a test and it says you're positive for fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
It's a pain related.
Wow.
But yeah, the hospital just says like, oh, sorry, oh, lol. Like, could happen to anybody. That's why we practice. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
The important thing is they got the bills out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got the bills out. But the thing is, like, trying to look at it from first principles, it's hard on first inspection. Like, we can say that she broke the law and she didn't follow the correct legal procedure. But on like an ethical level, on a moral level, was Dr. Smith initially purely wrong? And it's hard on some level for me to just come out and just condemn Dr. Smith, because Dr. Smith could have been right. And the fact that she's proven wrong in the end, I don't think is enough to condemn her, because it could have been different, right? At least in first principles, you have this situation that presents itself, and you're like, it appears like this could be true, and it could have been true. And if it had been true, right? If it had been true, then Dr. Smith would presumably been praised as, a person who helped Maya escape from a truly horrible situation.
Well,
right?
I guess
so. It can't, to my mind, depend on whether or not she's proven right or not, whether what she did was right or not. It can't be outcome dependent, because that's unfair. It has to be based on what you know.
What about if faced with all countervailing evidence, she keeps doubling down? At what point? Because you're right. Oh, you can be right to begin with, but then if you don't accept any countervailing evidence and you keep going, now do you start to grow a liability?
Yeah, so it's challenging, because you can imagine, every lawyer in the room could imagine a situation, I think at least in principle, you could imagine a situation where other lawyers are making a call and you, in your best professional judgment, are like, no, I want to go a different way, because in my best professional judgment, this is the right call. Now, if it turns out in the end that you're right, everyone's going to think you're a complete genius, right? Because, wow, you saw something no one else saw. But if it turns out that, no, the consensus was right, suddenly it's like, oh, look at the malpractice. What a fool you were to reject everyone else's advice. So I'm reluctant. I'm reluctant to say, okay, because the conclusion was bad, she was therefore wrong in the first instance.
The ends doesn't justify the means.
It can't be outcome dependent, because it's like the football coach who makes that that call. It's like, oh, it's 4th and 20. Let's throw it instead of let's kick the ball. If it works, everyone praises him.
You see, I'm somewhere in the middle on that.
It can't be outcome dependent. I just is so
I don't know. I see. I have mixed feelings on that, because if the outcome is so vile or so wrong, depending on what the ultimate outcome is, isn't there a point of example like you shouldn't be doing this? And I don't know. Here's a weird example. It's like people who do false accusations.
Yeah. A lot of times they know that they're false. So that's the different situation.
I guess.
Yeah, but isn't this is classic med mal, though, right?
Yeah.
You have to. What's the prevailing standard of care? Did the person follow that prevailing standard of care? If they deviate from that, then they're obviously liable for negligence, right?
But I do know the case, by the way, for people in chat. I'm aware that Maya's mother killed herself or self-deleted. I should have said I apologize for the user censors.
And is this Dr. Smith having multiple lawsuits against her?
Yeah. She also had a lot of lawsuits against her because of previous instances, which I covered in my case where.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, like, I guess when I hear like she's trying to do the right thing, but it's like, I guess it means to sit her down and be like, honey, you ain't batting 1,000 here. Like, listen, Dr. Toots, like, I think it's this. Like, are you really sure though? Like, we've been down this road and you've been sued now. Like, this is like letting, it's like you keep crashing airplanes. Like, oh, this time I'll get it right. Like, are you really though? And, locking this girl up, like, I'm doing the right things. Like, you weren't even getting, like, the courts not being involved. Like, all the stuff you would normally do. I find it, like,
that's the best I can do is just translate it back into law, and then things become a little bit clearer for me, because then I'm like, okay, let's just follow the law, and we can be like, look, you didn't have court permission, you didn't have the parents' permission, you didn't have the child's permission, they weren't consenting these procedures or treatments. You can't do that, okay? You can't do that. I can make the decision a lot easier on the law than I can on the medical ethics. Because I think the medical ethics are complicated. But then again, maybe I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm not a doctor. So maybe it's clear to a doctor what the right answer is. I don't know.
But I guess it's just the idea of like, I'm relying on my medical judgment, and it's like apparently a lot of people have questions about your medical judgment, and this sounds like a Dunning-Kruger thing where it's like, I'm the expert on this. Like, okay, well, I really hope at the end of this woman has realized, like, I really hope somebody has sat her down and be like, honey, whatever you thought you were, you ain't it. Like, go knit or something. Like, you need to go take a break.
You need to not be in that position.
Well, you need to not be a doctor, because I can't trust you to be ethical, and I couldn't trust you to check little Jimmy's like ear infection at this point.
Yeah, so, but from what you guys were saying, this seems like a hell of a case for you. Got maybe criminal assault charges here, because number one, if you're treating someone's child without permission and consent for these treatments, that's generally assault from a doctor.
You can charge it with kidnapping.
That's when
they refuse to allow to discharge the child at a time when you don't have
another
parents are like, you got to discharge this child, and you're like, no. I'm like, okay, that's kidnapping. You refuse to allow them to leave.
This is beyond. This is beyond the negligence thing, and even though I do sympathize with Kurt, we're like, hey, if this was right, blah 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 blah. But to be fair, this doctor seems to have strayed from the standard of care in a more than negligent way, but possibly even a reckless way, where a reasonable person would have foreseen that something like this could have gone the wrong way. So even though it's not outcome dependent, if you can prove that another reasonable person following the rules wouldn't have come to such a horrible, then you may be talking about some type of involuntary issue here.
Yeah. Also, Ellen apparently says the knitters don't want her, so my apologies to all the knitters out there.
All right.
Oh, you know what? Can I share this quick story? I think is so hilarious.
Sure.
Have you guys ever heard of? It's called PNS. It's called post-nut syndrome. This is all right. So Joe Rogan.
Well, what are they classifying it as?
All right. So this is what it is. Just in case you haven't known, No, this is like a real thing now.
Like
this is experiencing some sort of guilt following climax after having relations with the opposite sex. If you're a man with a woman. This is like
I mean, like, is it like guilt? Like, oh yeah, I just beat it up, guilt, or
no, like guilt, like oh my god, I it's like waking up the next morning and finding out I had too many drinks. No, I shouldn't have slept with her. That type of thing.
I mean,
there's a syndrome for this now.
Let me show
Eric's
you.
eyes are going wild. Like, oh my god, you guys are gonna get me demonetized.
Oh no.
How did we? Please please draw me the line from taking care of Maya to whatever this is.
So I guess like it's been like 15 years since college for me. Almost, yeah. I mean, did that happen? I mean,
well, I mean, there's an argument that happens the other way.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's called a 4-letter R word. Great. So he shows up right after we finish talking about Maya.
So I guess, Nate, I would just say, like, I've never had that, like, it's never been like guilt. It's more like if I was gambling and I put $20 down on blackjack and I lost, like, oh, well. Whoops.
Yeah, I did think this was like such a huge thing, but obviously this goes into, because this woman says that to avoid this, she won't sleep with men until he spends $2,000 on her. But I think that's more prostitution than anything, right? If there's a number involved in it, if you spend $2,000 and then we can sleep together,
Went pro ho.
I got news for you, yo.
Yeah, she's trying to say that that's just her standard, but I think that's a little bit. Whenever you get an exact number, $2,000, huh? That's all I got to spend. Well, can I just give you the cash, or do I actually have to go through the whole,
Post not syndrome.
I thought that the regret came in when the test came up positive that they didn't mean to happen. That would be the syndrome I would think you're talking about, like when there's suddenly a potential another life on the way. That would be a regret.
Rogan says you realize you made a mistake, especially if the woman is really into you and you're really not into her, and you're like, oh, I made an error, and then you do feel like an a-hole, but I'm just being honest. I got tricked by genetics, Rogan said.
I'm sure many of Rob's clients have said words along these lines. I'm just guessing.
I think that's part of the whole dating life, right? You wake up in the morning, you're like, I really didn't like this chick that much. It's like, now we have to actually treat this, You
win some, you lose some.
Yeah, it is what it is.
So how about taking care of Maya? All right.
Yeah. And giving her $2,000 and, paying $2,000 before you get started. But, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I got a super chat actually for a little bit back before we go into it. Well, definitely we've got to talk about that too in a second. Oh, lunch programs. Somebody pointed out that lunch programs and other services are offered by the feds, and then when conservatives turn them down, the media destroys them. So I guess that's a way that federal money may be getting in. I don't know. That goes all the way back to a while.
That happened during one of the first shutdowns back in the 90s. Like, there were supposedly like little kids writing letters to congressmen like, I'm so hungry, and it's like, please stop the shutdown.
Oh, it's ridiculous. In the last
this one's
days,
interesting.
It has come out that the hospital had a total failure of safety finding by a regulatory agency after the hospital had a witness on the stand saying the exact opposite. The judge was pissed. So, Rob, if you are here in time,
this one's great. So, this is the example of 4D chess that you see with trial litigation. Plaintiff's counsel brings on an expert. They want to bring on the expert, and a defense counsel starts to voir dire this guy like crazy. They do not want this expert to testify in the plaintiff's opening. Well, that's because this guy is essentially an expert on hospital credentialing, hospital management. He's run all these different hospitals. And he starts to intimate that there were possibly systemic issues. Objections: exceeds the scope of the expertise, not relevant because you can't talk about system-wide failures unless you can make that causal connection to Maya and her treatment. Defense puts on an expert, and this expert had reviewed joint committee reports, like had reviewed 3 or 4 pages, a 3-page summary sheet that was given to him by defense counsel. So in cross-examination, this guy just gets slaughtered, brutal cross-examination. But throughout his testimony, he starts to say, Jay Hatch is doing great. There's no problem. They're certified. They're accredited. They're running swell. This then brings up the rebuttal, the very last day of evidence, what was supposed to be the last day of evidence. We bring on a rebuttal witness, Dr. Corcoran, who comes back. Turns out that the Joint Committee had been conducting, did a random inspection, found that there were serious issues, widespread and egregious concerns regarding patient care. And this was related to essentially the Heart Institute, which had been, this has been a nightmare in the Tampa area for years, to the point where, there was reports of needles being left in children's hearts. The mortality rate for children at this particular hospital was like 3 times that of other hospitals in similar situations. So this starts to get brought up a little bit. And the judge, you start seeing objections go like crazy. The judge excuses the jury, and then we get down to the meat of it. The judge gets freaking pissed because he looks at defense counsel. He basically says, you had a witness on the stand that basically said Jay Hatch was blessed by the Joint Commission. That apparently is not the case. So the judge basically orders Jay Hatch to produce materials yesterday, orders them to have a corporate designee sit for a depot today. That depot is taking at 4:00. And on Monday, the judge is going to be considering whether to allow the plaintiffs to produce information about Johns Hopkins, essentially these egregious systemic issues within the hospital as a whole. The ramifications of this, in a case like this, where you have a questionable issue, then you have defense that goes up and says, don't worry, we're fine. And if the plaintiffs have the opportunity on the very last day before closing arguments to introduce systemic failures in the hospital, resulting in widespread and egregious concerns of patient safety, keep writing zeros, because I'm
surprised we're not at that point right now where they're sitting across from like, we'll tell you when to stop.
Yeah, it is so wild. Not only that, but the attorney that represents Jay Hatch has represented them in litigation capacity for years upon years and is he's arguing to the judge and saying, well, I don't have actual knowledge of this. And I'm like, Mr. Hunter, come on, dude. I know damn well that your file probably has a bunch of this information. They just fell into this trap. They fell into it.
Amazing. Okay, so let me go to.
Oh, Rob, I have a question for you. Is this Dr. Smith or whoever this is she still practicing, and does she still have a medical license?
Sally Smith has a medical license. She's still practicing. She's in private practice right now. She's no longer, and she wasn't really employed directly by the hospital. She was employed. She was employed through a subcontractor that was in part worked as a partnership with the Department of Children and Families. So DCF contracted out to a child protection team. So she was the medical director of the child protection team. So quasi-independent. We're not sure what her relationship to the hospital is. The hospital needs to. Well, the plaintiffs need to prove that she was an apparent agent.
The fact she's still practicing scares me.
Yeah, she's a character. She's pretty tough, and she really
she's lucky a lot of things in Minecraft haven't happened to her.
I mean, she goes hard in the paint on these issues. When she made that judgment call, she stuck to her guns on it. Oh, and we've got a request to remove a juror that was filed this morning or yesterday.
How's that motion?
The jury gets to ask questions. So they're trying to infer from the jury's questions, or this particular juror's questions, that this juror has a predisposition or a bias that they are not, that they're communicating. Okay. And I'm going, well, Mr. Hunter, you're pretty good at trying to read minds. I don't know that you're going to get there.
Yeah, that's tough. It
only counts if it's extrajudicial. If the juror is asking these questions because of things they learned from the case, that's fine. That's not bias, and that's just they hate you because of things they heard in the case.
Yeah, that's the scary part about jurors asking questions. I've had trials where they can do that, and you get to exactly know what they're thinking and where they're going, and they get mad if, like, sometimes the court decides we can't answer that question. they'll write the next round like, why didn't you answer my question? Like, and you just see where they're going very quickly.
I mean, get this. So the hospital still had peremptory strikes left when they sat the jury. They let former law enforcement, retired law enforcement on the jury, and they let former medical training.
That's a decision. That's a decision you made. Thinking,
the only way they could have done that is if they somehow thought, I mean, they're too close to the case. I think they're so hung up in the removal proceeding, the dependency action. Same attorneys represent the hospital in both. They're still looking at this as an investigation into Mudge houses by proxy, not about the care that the child received while being sheltered at the hospital.
Yeah. Wow.
Can you give us just a 30 to 60-second overview of the case, if that's possible? Because people were critical of my overview, so they wanted to hear your version of it.
Prior diagnosis of CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, prior treatment that involved physical and occupational therapy, that then went to ketamine therapy, that then went to a ketamine-induced coma. Child appears JHatch October 7th of 2016 with acute pain in the stomach. They try to diagnose the pain. October 8th, very next day, a call is made to the DCF hotline. That call gets no report or investigation is authorized after that one. Then second, a call is made from doctor at the hospital. Dr. Tepa Sanchez calls Dr. Sally Smith. Sally Smith then goes and accesses the child's medical records without the call or investigation. Informs Dr. Tepa Smith this is what kind of needs to happen. Dr. Tepa Smith then a couple days later calls, and then they get the investigation opened via DCF. The investigation, Sally Smith walks in. She says that she was wearing plain clothes. Dad says she was wearing medical scrubs or a lab coat that had JHatch, the logo on it. She admits that she has a badge that says Johns Hopkins All Children's with her name on it. She says she introduces herself as a person, medical director of the child protection team. Doesn't really go into what that is. Interviews both parents, goes back, creates a 45-page report, submits that to the court. Shelter order is entered on October 13th. Child is sheltered. There's multiple orders that kind of carve. Say that again?
I said, oh my God, you're kidding me.
Oh no, there's multiple shelter orders that are entered after that. That are restricted contact and communication, supervised visitation. The allegation is the hospital exceeded the scope of those orders, both in a 48-hour observation in a EEG room that was without the parents' consent. DCF didn't expressly approve it. Sally Smith has a note in her file suggesting, that this take place. The hospital says we have a medical diagnostic reason for doing it. The allegation is that Maya would have to get out of the bed to go to use the commode. Instead, she soils herself because she is still in this pain. Hospital then starts to administer small doses of ketamine, various things that occur. Supervised contact via one of the hospital's social workers, Kathy Beatty. Kathy Beatty cuts off the call various times. Maya's not allowed to meet with her priest. No religious artifacts allowed because they're worried that the mom's going to sneak ketamine in through the holy water or the Eucharist.
Brave social workers.
And then on January 6th, Maya's about to go to the hearing. Kathy Beatty pulls her into one of exam rooms, disrobes her, takes photographs of her. She says that she was instructed by risk management, but there's conflicting testimony as to whether she was or was not and did it independently. Curiously, those photographs do not end up in this child's medical file. They were found within the risk management file. So then January 6th, they go to the hearing. Judge says, based on observations from the doctors and Sally Smith, no, Mom, you're not allowed to hug your daughter at this point in time. Mom writes an email. Writes an email to both the judge and writes an email to various people that says, take care of Maya, and blames the entire system for everything. The next day, Kyle Kowalski, the son of Beata Kowalski, stumbles and opens the garage, and Mom is found hanging there in the garage with a necklace that was given to her by her daughter that her daughter bought while in the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of detail. That was a lot of names I missed, and dates I certainly didn't have.
Now, there's some people needing to take the honorable way out at this point. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, well, somebody's arguing that Kyle did not find her.
No, sorry. Maybe no. Sorry, you're right, Island. You're right. It wasn't Kyle. I think it was Jack's brother. Jack's brother found her.
Oh,
Jack is the husband. So it was the. Yep. Thanks,
Okay.
Island. Good catch.
But man, what a thing to criticize Rob on. He makes a slight mistake, man.
So the hospital has
give the man a break.
The hospital has naked pictures of a child just kicking around.
Right.
To be fair, she's not naked. She was in a sports bra and shorts. Now, here's the problem, though, is that it's a damn training bra that she's in one of the photos, and they keep saying it's a sports bra. It's a training bra. To the point where they're doing this testimony, I'm trying to recap it. I was so bothered by seeing these photographs up. I actually pulled them off the screen and just let people listen because it was really bothering me that these photographs took place at all. It really, yeah. They have not explained away those situations. There might be a question as to whether it was Munchausen syndrome by proxy, as to whether CRPS was the appropriate diagnosis.
A question on that, though. Hold on, though, because I understand Munchausen syndrome by proxy, but from what everybody has said, she took the child to doctors, and these doctors prescribed that treatment. Mm-hmm. The mother didn't just say, hey, let me go get some ketamine, I'm going to do this myself. That there was medical guidance, it appears, from somebody, and that's there's treatment.
There's allegations there's allegations of doctor shopping. And this is something where you've got the plaintiff's case and the defendant's case. And for my point, I'm looking at it and going, okay, hospital, I'll concede the argument. Right? Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Explain these incidents. Explain the denial of the Eucharist. Explain the EEG room. Explain the photographs. Explain everything else that's there. Explain that. Even if, because the hospital says, look, if it's conversion disorder or Munchausen syndrome by proxy or CRPS, the standard of care is the same. We do psychological therapy. We do physical therapy and occupational therapy. I'm sitting there going, okay, well, you've just kind of said that if the standard of care is the same under both of these diagnoses, now I want to hear about why these photographs are within the standard of care. I want to hear about the EEG room and why that's within the standard of care. Start explaining this.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's a practice. We're not perfect.
All right, so let me go to a slightly less controversial subject, or nobody will have thoughts about. Last super chat here. The Chogi Show Live. Were you talking about it already? But I think I know where you all stand on the Trump ballot issue. More concerned about where the courts will stand. So that's actually a good question. How many of you are troubled that they are suing to keep the number one presidential candidate, with a bullet, there's no question here, off the ballot in states?
Yeah, it's pretty troubling.
And now I know Nate's all for it, so Nate, you can argue the other side.
I don't think Nate's all for it.
I'm all for. I'm sorry.
Nate signed the complaint.
How did Nate get thrown under the bus here?
I'm all for what? Trump being off the ballot?
Yeah.
Oh no! I'm not for Trump being off the ballot. No, I think you should. I think you definitely should be on the ballot. I just think I think there's one thing though, and again, it's all contextualized. This is not like people seem to be up in arms about this, which I understand, but if you know politics, this has always been part of the game. I don't know if you read I think I was talking to Eric earlier about this. In Obama's book, he talks about literally how he got candidates kicked off the ballot for not having enough signatures, for not having this, for not having that. I think the Bushes did it. This is par for the course when you're in politics. You know, if you find a way that you can get the other guy off the ballot, then you get them off the ballot, right? It's
the mechanism they're going about it with this 14th Amendment argument is problematic.
That's where I think this may be the issue. But I think just the if you're saying, well, hey, trying to get him off the ballot so I don't have to compete against him in this state is something that's new or something that's nefarious. Then you just don't know politics, because I think even George Bush tried to get Ross Perot kicked off a couple of ballots in a couple of states. This is it's just par for the course of politics. So I would suspect nothing less. And I think if it was in reverse, I think if Trump was able to try to do this to Biden, I think he would do the same thing, because it just makes sense in the political realm.
The most concerning part of it for me from a legal point of view is the courts who are like, well, the 14th Amendment, Section 3 is self-enforcing. So we don't need any specific congressional authorization to do this. We can just say that we can just declare it to be true, and sort of declaratory relief is what they're looking for, that Trump engaged in insurrection or rebellion within the meaning of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, because we say he did. I don't think this works.
Yeah,
I think Congress can the article, the fifth section of Article 14 says Congress can, by appropriate legislation, do this. So I think Congress can kind of do what it wants, and historically has in the past, in specific instances, given authority to including state level authority. And I think they can do it, but I don't think they have done it, right? I think all that authority is sort of gone. And so the problem, from my viewpoint, is the courts are just like, well, we can just create it out of nothing, right? Rather than looking for congressional authorization, we'll simply say that's self-enforcing somehow, and that we're going to find this as a matter of fact that he did this and therefore is disqualified, is a lot of hubris, to be quite honest, that this can be done, and it seems impossible. That's what I think. I don't think it legally makes sense.
It's disturbing to me because they are, in my opinion, we're not talking about a lightweight candidate here. You are literally disenfranchising almost 50%, or well, I can go low numbers and just say hardcore 35% of the public. You're just saying you're irrelevant.
Well, I wouldn't depend on that factor, because the question is whether he's entitled to be on the ballot or not. If it disenfranchises less people, it doesn't become less important, because everyone's rights matter, right? That's why freedom of speech matters if it's one person, or if it matters it's 100 million people. So I don't think that the fact that Trump is the top candidate is what matters. The fact that what matters is their legal theory. It just allows them to just declare it without any criminal finding, without congressional authorization. So it's void for that reason.
Okay, I agree.
But quick question though, just on the process for states though, because states are their own thing for even federal elections, right? Who they can have on their own ballots. How would this affect the federal issue here? Because it's like a weird little happenstance, because the state is like the judge of who they, how they do their elections, but still we're talking about a federal election. So if the state then says, well, based on our rules, he's not on the ballot, how would that implicate the federal government?
For that, I would cite U.S. term limits versus Thornton, which dealt with trying to add provisions to the congressional candidates. Under U.S. term limits, they tried to say that a person wouldn't be on the ballot if they'd already served X amount of times. I forget what exactly the number was, but it doesn't really matter. U.S. Supreme Court said that all the requirements to be a member of Congress are listed in the Constitution, and what's true for Congress in that sense would be true for the president, right? To be president, you have to be 35 years old. You have to be natural born. You have to have lived in the United States for 14 years. And those are the requirements, right? If you want to be disqualified, then there are requirements there too, right? You can be disqualified because you've been impeached and convicted, and Congress has decided to disqualify you. You can be disqualified under the 14th Amendment, Section 3, with it, but that has to be authorized by Congress. So a state can't add additional surplusage terms. So they can say the person's not 35. They can say they haven't lived in the United States 14 years. They can say, I'm looking at you, Cenk Uygur, that you are not a natural born citizen of the United States. But they can't say, just arbitrarily, oh, he's engaged in insurrection because we say he has, absent congressional authorization within the meaning of Section 5 of the 14th Amendment.
Yeah,
no, I'm citing U.S. term limits versus Thornton and calling it a day.
I'm giving you that, but then wouldn't that invalidate all those requirements at the state level? For instance, that would require the signature requirements, right? Because all those requirements at the state to even get on a state ballot in this particular case, their registration process, all that stuff, all that would be extra layers to this process. So if that's the case, then any procedure that the state put forward, you could just cite this case that you're talking about and say, well, that's all nonsense.
I think for to have a certain, I don't know what the signature requirements are for the position for Congress, but I think you could make a credible argument that they're void.
I was thinking that
or
there was
for federal ballot.
Kurt, I was thinking there was a case saying that if it was aimed more at the process of it versus the qualification of the candidate, that a process thing had more leniency. You know, you could do certain of these things, have signature requirements and stuff like that in how you conducted the election versus putting a qualification on a candidate. Like saying I'm kicking you off the thing because of this characteristic of you, versus a general thing that would apply, like having certain signatures, more of an administrative type of thing, not a.
You might be right. You might be right when it comes to the number of signatures. I'm not familiar with that case, so I'll defer. All right, we can move on to something else.
So what Eric saw, Rob, so you gave a great fact summary of the Maya case. Now, in terms of the theories of liability, the plaintiffs are, is it Maya, her dad, the estate, and is it like infliction of emotional distress? You know, how do they get to the money at the end?
So this case is interesting. They're on their 8th amended complaint. I think there were 23 counts or something like that. There were 52 orders for summary judgment. 52.
Wow.
That's a lot.
So
wow.
And that's not even including the motions in limine and all the orders in limine. So, like I said, this is walking a tightrope. I think that they've still got, so they've got IIED, intentional infliction of emotional distress. They have negligent infliction of emotional distress, battery, false imprisonment, etc. Things that you would kind of expect. They have a theory of negligence, and then they have negligent training, various things. But the IIED, the big claim was for the wrongful death, right? Intentional infliction of emotional distress resulting in the death of another, or from the death of another person. Now, the problem is that suicide is usually considered an intervening factor. So that's essentially someone's own personal choice. And this is brand new in the law. It's used in the criminal cases when you've got statutes that lay out how you can bring prosecutions for that type of action that results in the death of a child. So bullying, cyberbullying, right? So we're kind of borrowing some of the law from that and trying to figure out, and I say we, I mean the judge is kind of borrowing some of the law from that and trying to figure out how to navigate it. Both sides have essentially appellate counsel who are preparing the jury instructions. The plaintiffs have a guy, Mr. Elegant, who's been practicing in front of the Florida Supreme Court for something like 25 years. The defense have someone who used to be the chief judge of the Second Court of Appeals, Second Circuit Court of Appeals. So they're remarkably experienced. And when they say they have not found a single case where this theory of liability has made it all the way to a jury trial, they mean it. So they know this is going to be appealed. We're in a very new area of law here. And honestly, I think that some of these things are like well overdue. The law moves really slow. So some of these things are pretty overdue, and testing some of these legal theories that used to exist where you had to show some type of physical injury for IIED. And that just cuts against the grain now. Like, do you really have to show a physical injury from someone who's witnessed their mother dead? Like, do we really need to do that? So we'll see. This is going to be appealed. It's going to be hung up for years on appeal.
Wow. Let me. I have one more story I wanted to just get everybody's opinion on before we close out, because I think this is going to get really bad really soon. Where did it go? Okay, add that. There we go. AI generated nude pics have started, or of girls at a high school trigger a police probe. Mm-hmm. Now, everybody knew this was coming. I think everybody knew that as soon as you could do AI and you can make, drawings and deep fakes, then you're going to be, or people are going to be doing it with females, etc. This is where technology, I feel, though, is ahead of the law in some ways. I mean, how do you deal with this kind of situation?
Yeah, because I believe under the federal law, when it comes to child pizza, that if it is a image of an identifiable person, it still qualifies as child pizza. So if it's not a real person, it's not. But if it is a real person, it is. So if they're using a real person's image as a baseline image and generating child pizza, then I'm pretty sure that qualifies as child pizza for federal purposes. So under the law. So they have a real problem.
Interesting.
Yeah, let me see if I can find the exact quote while you guys are talking.
Rob, you have any thoughts on it?
I'm curious to see how this is. I mean, we've talked about this before, how AI generated images, and I mean, I'm just waiting for this to show up in one of my trials where I've got to somehow verify that an image is actually the real image, or a text message sent image is either real, created by AI, altered by AI. I don't know how we're going to handle this. I don't know how I'm going to handle this when it gets brought into a trial. And I can't see it that far off. I mean, this is going to happen, and I don't know what to do. So that's my thought. I'm worried. If anyone's out there looking for a CLE topic to teach, this might be a good one.
I don't know who wants to take it on though, because like you say, you're at the cutting edge of things.
All right, I found the exact definition. It's 18 USC 2256. If you guys want to look it up at home, and it's subsection 8 where it defines CP. CP means any visual depiction, including any photograph, film, video, picture, or computer generated image or picture, whether made by or produced by electronic, mechanical, or other means. And then subsection B, such visual depiction is a digital image, computer image, or computer generated image that is or is indistinguishable from a minor engaged in the conduct. So if you have, and then it goes to identifiable person, who is recognized by the actual person, by the person's face, likeness, or other distinguishing characteristic. So I think under the current law, if you are using a real person as a baseline image and you're generating fake images, I think you've just generated CP and are guilty under federal law.
Okay, that's for children. What about adults? Would this fall under a revenge prawn scenario question? I because I think this is going to get very widespread.
I don't know, because those ones, to the best of my knowledge, there is no federal revenge. Well, there might be. I'd have to double check. But either way, I'd have to look up the exact statutory definitions and how they're defined.
Well, and I think there's also the issue of, like, you can just take somebody's head and slap it on a body, and if the AI does a good enough job, that's not really revenge. Like, you know, typically we're talking about revenge porn. It's you are using the goods you already had from somebody.
Right.
So,
that's why it's confusing.
Yeah, that's where I think that's a bit of a loophole. It's like, I generated new images. You know, your head's on it, but it's. I think there might be some, depending on how your state's worded, that could be a problem.
Well, and the challenge here is that this type of area, this type of subject matter is where we get a lot of. It's where bad facts make bad law.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got someone who's showing up in court and they're trying to defend something that we would morally believe is indefensible. Right. They've kind of taken an image that's a standard image of a person, and they have intentionally altered it with the intention of deceiving other people to believe that this is actually someone in their nude. And that's a pretty gross person that does that. Now put those facts in front of a judge and say, judge, make the right choice. If the judge makes the wrong choice, or makes any choice.
Well, this whole deep fake scenario is a huge problem in that. Yes. I'm just saying it's, and it's the children aspect. That's easy. There's a lot, more stringency there, but doing that to other people, is that bullying? Is it harassment? Is it even actionable? Is it this?
Civilly, it's actionable for sure, man. I think IID, any ID, intentional infliction, negligent infliction, invasion of right of privacy, among other things, come immediately.
What right of privacy do you have if I slap your head on your? Is that really your naked body?
Yeah, if I Photoshop, is that different? You say that's where it gets really weird, because the AI can be very
generating
convincing.
it. Yeah, like. So now it's like we're gonna have to you're gonna have a deposition. What you're gonna have to whip it all out, because you're saying that I'm invading your privacy, but how are you saying that's truly what it is? I think there's I think that there's going to be a lot of.
All right, defamation then, because it's not actually my body, but you're pretending it is. How about that? Defamation.
I mean, well, but if I'm making you look hot, it's going to be like, did you suffer damage? Well, if people are simping for you, that could be damage. No, I agree, Kurt. But I think this is going to be an issue where the law is going to be.
Well, I mean, even revenge porn wasn't illegal 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I mean, the law, and when they were first proposing these laws, mm-hmm. I was skeptical at the time because I'm like, wait a second, this is subject matter based restrictions, mm-hmm. and how are we doing this on a First Amendment analysis?
Yeah.
So now we have to have that whole debate again. I'm like, wait a second, if I'm simulating something, what is the First Amendment implications of that?
Well, the other thing I was going to say though too, Eric, is even if it's computer generated, there are some limits to what you can do with even for cheese pizza. If the cheese pizza is obscene, you could still run afoul of the law, like depending on how bad it is.
You want to go to the Miller test on obscenity? That'll be fun.
Well, no, but there is some legal, like you have to be careful about what kind of even child-based stuff you're doing can run you into an issue. But this whole thing is I don't know how you're going to be able to address it. I think it's for now going to have to be a black hole until.
I think another societal concern too is that a lot of this would be intentional, like people may be doing that of their own images. It's like an Instagram filter on steroids, so to speak. It's like, let me just replace and do this body representing. And I'm wondering if there's a societal ill on this. We already have problems with young people having expectations that whoever they're sleeping with or being with is going to look like what they're seeing on the internet. And we all know that a lot of that is a complete lie. And this to me is starting to fabricate reality even further and confusing, especially younger people.
You're not going to get a handle on this until the booty patrol is properly funded by the federal government and can they find probable cause.
Nice callback there.
That's perfect.
And Alyssa's right. It's always it's going to be bad guys who make the law regarding this. It's not going to be just some guy sitting around. It's going to be a person who's being malicious. I mean, that's all the laws like we have are generally from bad people doing bad things, but also like
well, that's where that's where every case is a story. Yeah, it's one of the things I point out. It's like every case is a story, every law is a story, and I liked it one time when I went and did the very first assault case ever, because it's like there's actually traceable record. It's like, and here's this person's story about the time a guy went to a tavern that was closed and started beating on the tavern doors with an axe. And hence the very first assault case ever, because they didn't wind up hitting the person. So we had to come up with a brand new cause of action called assault. And I'm like, so yeah, every case is a story. Once there was a guy.
That's true. Well, on that note, I hope those of you who are doing the replay will comment on this, because I really do want to hear everybody's opinion. I think we're going to be facing more and more and more with AI generation. I mean, everything from plagiarism problems to image problems to performance issues. It's not going away.
No.
And
it's only going to get worse.
Well, it's only going to get different. I mean, it's like worse, better. It's
really it's only going to become bigger and bigger of an issue, because it's going to be everywhere.
This is true. So, Rob, what do you have coming up? What can people buy?
I've got a Friday show. I'm going to split between talking about the Maya updates, some of those motions, and then SBF finally getting convicted or found guilty on all charges within a period of 4.5 hours after a month-long trial. Testifying in his own defense was clearly the wise move. And then on Saturday, I just want to remind everyone, Ian Runkle the Bailey begins his 24-hour live stream, his 24-hour charity live stream for the benefit of the Stollery Children's Hospital. So I'm going to try and jump on that at various occasions. But just if you guys can go donate. Last year he raised over $50,000 for that children's hospital. This year I hope we can do the same.
Awesome. Steve.
Awesome.
Early morning stream tomorrow with get rid of, this is the week to get rid of your judge. Murdaugh's trying to get rid of Judge Newman. We already talked about Delphi and the attempt to get rid of the judge there that may be warranted. And what's going on in other cases. Sarah Boone's got a lawyer she likes. Daryl Brooks doesn't have one. All the things going on all the cases with all the scumbags that are out there.
Maybe she could hire Daryl Brooks.
But she's got one she likes now, though. She's liking this new guy.
Yeah. Okay, Sean, what do you have going?
Not too much tonight. I might be hopping on in the evening, do a little bit of painting. Got a model to finish up, but other than that, yeah, not too much else this weekend. Just going to be got some real work to do after a while. So, yay!
All right, Kurt.
Yeah, I'm currently visiting my folks, so I'm taking a little bit of a break, sabbatical here from the LawTube thing, but I'm available just generally for streaming, and I'll be back in town next week. But check out one of my old videos. I have a nice little video trying to give a summary of my story from the medical perspective and medical ethics perspective you could check out. So, and I have one from a week ago dealing with the UAW strike, which there looks like there might be some partial settlements coming there. So check out some of that stuff, and I'll be producing content again in a week or so when I get back home. So we'll see.
All right. Well, folks, if you like this kind of thing, as I say every week, please consider subscribing or following or whatever device or system you're using. Keep in touch, and we do this every Friday at noon, and I'll see you next week.